Today, let's talk about how you can use your fabric swatches for different ideas. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we're going to be talking about different ways that you can reuse your fabric swatches. So if you're like me, you may buy fabric swatches to help figure out what type of more expensive fabric you're going to be buying later on. That way you can see what it looks like in person, you can get a feel for it. This is a great way when you're shopping for fabrics online, but sometimes after you do this, you just end up with a whole pile of fabrics like you can see that I did. And of course, I don't want to waste any of these fabrics, but sometimes you do have to pay money to get them. So I'm going to give you some ideas for how you can reuse these into different projects. So the first one, as you can see, I have these two swatches right here, and they are the same type of fabric, just in a different color. And I'm actually using this navy blue one to make a dress. So the first option you can do is use these to test out everything else that you're going to be using for that bigger project. So as an example, you can test this out to see how does it serge? How does it work with your sewing machine? What type of needle do you need to use? Are you able to press it? So first thing I tested was to see what was this like with my serger. I checked, was the needle going through it okay? Was there any damage happening to the fabric itself? What type of thread color did I think I want to use? This one was pretty simple for that, to see black. I can see it's still stretching though. The serger went through it really well, and so I don't have to worry about when I do my actual garment having the serger ruin it. Now another option is you can use your sewing machine for this and see how different stitches work on your sewing machine. Do you need a regular foot? Can you use a walking foot? Just really testing everything out before you use this fabric for whatever that bigger project is. And these swatches worked out great for me for this case. I can see what the stitch looks like. I can see for the straight stitch it's working well. I do notice that there is some stretch in my fabric. So when I'm looking at this, I'm like, maybe should I try using a stretch stitch as a zigzag foot to see how that holds up with my fabric as well. And whenever I'm doing these different type of stitches with it, it's really important that after you use that swatch, you see what does it look like. Is it laying okay? Do I think I'm going to be able to use this? And do I have any stretch and give if the stitch was supposed to have some? Overall, I think this one's looking really good. So now I'm going to test out one more option, and that's just what type of needle to use. So this is more just to help me figure out, do I want to use a ballpoint needle? Do I want to use a regular needle? Really just checking to see, is the fabric holding up okay, so that when I actually do all the work, I know what to expect. Now, pressing is probably one of the most important parts of any sewing project, and depending on what type of fabric you have, you could easily burn your fabric, you could damage the coloring on the outside, so really important to see, to make sure you understand how to work with that fabric. So as you can see here, I'm pressing it, seeing is it turning out okay, do I need to use a delicate setting, how is everything working, how does that crease turn out when I press it. So just really using these fabric swatches to the most of their ability for you so that you do not have to damage any of your good fabric. You are able to save all of that, and you've already done all the testing out ahead of time with the swatch. Now, all of those tips are great if you were actually going to be using the fabric later on, but what if you just have a bunch of fabric swatches that you've gotten over time and you didn't actually buy any more of that fabric? Well, an example is to come up with really tiny projects that you could make using that fabric. So an example of this would be like a little ear pod holder. So I have a video up on how I made this cute little ear pod holder that then I added some beads to. This fabric of the swatch is almost the exact same size for what you would need for the ear pod holder, so you could very easily whip out a few of these. You could make that for yourself, you could give it as gifts to family. You would see it looks so fun and sparkly. I think you could also maybe use this to make some sort of keychain if you wanted to. So depending on how you folded your fabric, you may be able to turn this into a really fun sparkly keychain for yourself, or to give away as others for gifts. So really a lot of different options that you can do with all of these different fabrics. Now, one thing I saw online when I was trying to look up different ideas for what to do with these, as you can see, a lot of the ones that I have are different textures, they're different colors, and I know sometimes that these can actually be really great for people who have sensory issues and also for dementia patients. So you could always add these little swatches to like a cuddle muff or some sort of sensory device so that you could play with it. People can use it with their hands just to get a feeling for those different textures. And I actually have a video that I did of making a cuddle muff for a dementia patient, so you could definitely watch that if you want to try to make one yourself. And you could see all these different textures, all these different feelings are going to give them something really to play around with, and you didn't actually have to buy a ton of each of the fabrics. Now, another option that you could do with these is if you have any sort of sewing diary, sketch wall, you could always add that little fabric swatch to that wall, to that sketch for the exact type of fabric you wanted to use for it. This would be a really fun way to collect all of your sewing memories that you have done over time, and then you'd be able to go back and see exactly the type of fabric that you had used. Now, the last idea is to do some sort of really fun and funky patchwork pillow, maybe a blanket, depending on how many you have, just really growing these out. Because as you can see, if you have a lot of fabric swatches, you could actually have a large piece of fabric that then you could create some sort of patchwork effect with. So this could be a very fun pillow covering. It could be one side of a very loud bag. Really, depending on how many different fabrics you had, you could do a lot with it to get that patchwork effect. Now, of course, all of these are just ideas for what you can do with these fabric swatches. I thought this was a really great video idea, especially as we are going into April, which is Earth Day, and really trying to think of different ways that we can reduce, reuse, and recycle all of our different fabrics and try to avoid having even more waste. What is your idea for when you are using fabric swatches? How do you reuse them? I'd love to know. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.